Blackbeard is the worst operator in Rainbow Six Siege. His shields are meant to stop the enemy from headshotting you, but they are destroyed by a single bullet. You'd be better off putting styrofoam in front of your head than relying on his shield, and his weapons are trash as well. I'd rather play anyone else other than Blackbeard. I wouldn't wish playing him on my worst enemy. And that also applies to Sins. Sin's weapons suck just like Blackbeard, but at least their gadget can be useful in some niche situations and bomb sites. Especially if you pick Sins along with a Glaz, you can make a solid duo for taking map control. Knock used to be amazing at taking map control and surprising the enemy team, but now since her gadget only hides her from cams, her gadget is virtually useless. Plus, if the enemy team brings a lot of traps, which is common nowadays, then you're going to have an even worse time trying to sneak up on the defense. You'd be better off picking Dokkaebi to hide from cams than picking Knock in most situations. You'd also be better off picking any other operator on the defense other than picking Oryx. Oryx's dashes are only useful for the team when he uses them to make rotates on the site, but if you have shotguns of any kind, then this is kind of useless. And the rest of Oryx's abilities like jumping up hatches are extremely niche and only strong on specific maps. Speaking of being extremely niche, Amaru's probably the definition of that. Her gadget allowing her to quickly rappel through hatches and windows is only useful for specific rush strategies, and there's a high likelihood that the enemy team will notice your rush attempt before you even get into the building. So her gadget can get you killed quite a lot if you are unlucky. Tajanka's gadget can also get him killed quite often. That's because his fireball launcher is slow and clunky, leaving him extremely vulnerable while it's out, and since the radius of his fire is so small, attackers can easily just walk or run through his fire and kill him. Well, you'd be better off picking a Smoke or a Goyo in almost every situation because their gadgets bring way more utility. Kali, just like Tajanka, is also a very difficult operator to justify bringing in the current meta. Unfortunately for her, she is stuck with a sniper as a primary weapon that can't consistently one-shot opponents, and her gadget can destroy lots of utility through walls, but with a loadout that puts you at such a disadvantage, this gadget really isn't enough. Kavera also has a loadout that significantly hurts her ability to perform. Her M12 SMG is weak with a slow fire rate, and her pistol has consistently been nerfed over the years. But on top of her weak loadout, her gadget Silent Step is also extremely weak. It only makes her footsteps quieter, which can be useful for sneaking up on attackers, but if the enemies just use their drones, you'll be stopped dead in your tracks. Thunderbird, on the other hand, suffers from a gadget that holds her back significantly. Her loadout is solid with a strong machine pistol and an assault rifle in her kit, but her gadget, the Kona stations, are an extreme problem. They heal for a very small amount. You have to actually travel across the map to get to her gadget so that way you can get the healing benefit, which is significantly worse than Doc, and the enemy team can use her healing stations against you. I wish it weren't the case because her loadout is extremely fun, but her gadget just simply sucks. Thorn's gadget is also extremely weak. Her razor blooms detonate too slowly, their radius is small, and their damage output is inconsistent at best. Some of you may enjoy playing Thorn, and so do I. Her guns are fun, but that doesn't change the fact that her ability to help the team is lacking. Clash is the exact opposite of this. Her ability to help the team is unmatched, with her shield being extremely useful for crowd control and slowing the attacker's push. She can also be an extremely good informational asset for the team, but since she doesn't have any primary weapons and has to spend most of the round behind her shield, she has very weak individual strength. So if her team doesn't play around her effectively, she can easily die and be rendered useless. Alibi's individual strength, on the other hand, is a completely different story. She has great weapons, and she's a 3-speed, which makes her perfect for some run and gun action. But outside of that, she isn't much of a help to her team. Her secondary gadgets suck, and the use cases for her primary gadget are niche. And the only thing she really brings to the table outside of that is her ability to make rotations. Rook is the first healing operator on this list that I think has some real use cases. His armor giving your entire team the ability to self-revive and guaranteeing a down when shot in the body can result in some clutch round changing utility. But those situations are few and far between, since a simple headshot renders his armor completely useless. His gadget is an excellent counter to Kali, but that's about it. Fuse is a decent operator for destroying lots of utility on the site and for forcing players out of a position. However, what puts him so low on this list is the loud audio cue his cluster charges make. This makes him an easy target for enemy nitro cells, and it leaves him vulnerable to roamers nearby. His cluster charge hard breach combo can be fun, but you'd be better off picking a vertical play operator in most situations. IQ is an excellent entry fragging operator. She has 3 great weapon choices and she's a 3-speed. But when you look at her gadget, you'll realize why she finds herself this low on this list. IQ's gadget is her electronic scanner on her wrist that allows her to see any electronic defender utility through walls. This is a decent gadget, but the information you're going to get from it typically can be achieved with just a simple drone. And since when her gadget is out, she has to hold her handgun instead of a primary weapon, she is left vulnerable for a significant period of time while using the gadget. IQ can be extremely useful for specific niche use cases, like for countering an Echo or a Valkyrie, but most of the time you'd be better off picking a different operator with a way more useful gadget. Ella, just like Alibi and Thorn, is a trap operator with a weak core gadget, but with a loadout that makes her a favorable choice for players who want to run and gun. The Scorpion Evo's low recoil, high fire rate and solid damage makes it a beautiful choice for aggression, and with her 3-speed rating, the strength is expanded. However, since her gadget only slightly disorients opponents, it makes her traps much weaker than other options that are higher on this list. Glaz fills a unique role on the attack with his ability to see through smoke, being unlike anyone else on his side of the game. This allows him to be a strong choice for specific strategies to help his team cover a plant or hold long lines of sight. And if he does have to get up close, he has his Bearing 9 machine pistol to help him win those engagements. The only thing stopping him from being higher is that Warden is a huge counter to him, and that he requires a decent amount of teamwork to get utility out of him. Pulse's strength is also reliant on the team you are playing him in, and also the map that you find yourself on. His heartbeat sensor is an amazing intel gathering capability, but if his team doesn't listen or react to his calls, then he is pretty useless. And also, if the map isn't ideal for Pulse being able to gather that intel, then that's also going to cause him a huge problem. He can also use his gadget if he's lucky to pick up free nitro kills, and to deny the plant late in the round. But if that is your sole goal, then you'd be better off picking other operators higher on this list, especially since Pulse's weapons are kind of lacking. Brava's weapons are amazing, however, but the reason she finds herself lower on this list is due to her gadget being quite situational. Brava's drones are loud, easy to spot, and often get shot before you can get the utility out of them you desire. Additionally, her drones have a lot of counters like normal drones, which worsens the situation. But for dealing with specific operators like Malusi, who's starting to pick up in the meta after her buff, and Aruni, since her gates being hacked can be a pretty huge deal for the defense, Brava can be strong, but those situations are few and far between. Doc is an absolute powerhouse when it comes to taking gunfights. He has the MP5 with an ACOG like his Rook counterpart, but with a more useful gadget in the form of his Stim pistol that allows him to fully heal or revive himself or teammates 3 times throughout any given round. And he has the Bailiff shotgun pistol and barbed wire to support his team. He is definitely a solid choice, but due to him being a healing operator, he relies on the enemy's inability to hit headshots and win engagements, which is why I couldn't justify putting him higher on this list. The same thing applies to Finka, whose gadget is the Adrenaline Surge, which upon activation will heal her entire team, give them all passive buffs like a quicker ADS speed, and it can even revive all down teammates from across the map. The main reason this is strong is because when paired with a shield operator like Montaigne or Blitz, she can heal any chip damage dealt to them from explosives and help them ADS much faster, which is necessary for shields since they ADS so slowly. But if you're not going to pick shield operators, then you'd probably be better off picking someone else on this list. Speaking of shield operators, Blitz is our first operator of that classification, and he finds himself in the 52nd spot. Blitz, after the shield rework, has definitely improved, but he still has a lot of problems present. He is more susceptible to explosives compared to Monty. He has a ton of counters like trap operators and Warden, and if he finds himself up against more than one defender, he is basically dead. However, where Blitz shines is in leading the team into a rush strategy by jumping through barricades, and for clearing out solo roamers in conjunction with his team. He's just a niche pick just like everyone else so far, which is why he finds himself here. Vigil is also a niche pick, but for very different reasons. Just like with Oryx we mentioned a while back, Vigil's gadget is extremely selfish. It only helps him and not his team. However, it is one of the most useful of these selfish gadgets in Siege. The ability to hide yourself from cameras can be huge, especially when on a roam, and in combination with his solid loadout, he does have a lot of potential in that role. But compared to other roamers that will be in this video, I think Vigil does fall short. Nomad is the perfect example of just an average operator. Her guns are average, her secondary gadgets are average, and her gadget is decent, but it isn't anything worth writing home about. The only thing her gadget is strong for is shutting down runouts and for shutting down defender rotations. Trying to use them for flank watch like many people do will result in the enemy team shooting her air jabs and flanking anyways. Zero is a very polarizing operator in Siege right now. He finds himself in the 49th spot on my list due to his cameras being extremely loud, pretty obvious once deployed, and since you have to rely on teammates to stay on top of your cams to get the most out of him. I will say the rest of Zero's kit is amazing. He has hard breach charges, a Gon 6, and his weapons are genuinely some of the best in the game. However, I'd rather pick other operators with a stronger gadget than Zero in most situations. Thermite is a prime example of what happens when a game evolves, but an operator within it does not. Thermite's gadget, the Exothermic Charge, is a great gadget for making huge holes in reinforced walls. However, they are slow to deploy, leaving Thermite extremely vulnerable. And since they take a while to detonate, Bandit Tricking and Tuberau can easily stop a Thermite charge in his tracks. Pretty much every other hard breacher is stronger than him in most situations because of this. After the addition of Echo's ACOG and him being returned to a 3 armor, Echo has definitely improved a lot since the last time I've ranked operators. However, he still has a huge drawback, which is the fact that his drones are easy to spot, causing them to get shot quite easily by the enemy team. But if you hide his drones effectively, they can be great for gathering intel for your team, and they can even allow your team to deny the plant later in the round. Speaking of planting, Capitao, with the help of his gadget, can support his team quite well in getting a plant down later in the round. His fire can be used to stop enemy rotations and to force defenders out of a position, and his smoke bolts can cut off lines of sight, allowing Capitao's team to take map control and get aggressive. This combined with his strong guns and decent secondary gadgets makes him a solid choice. The only reason he finds himself this low is because he's up against quite strong competition in his role. Striker is designed to be a well-rounded, good-at-all, master-of-nothing kind of operator, and she is quite effective at that role. Having access to multiple secondary gadgets at once offers some strong possibilities, and her weapons are strong as well. However, since attacker secondary gadgets are universally considered to be weaker than defender secondary gadgets, Striker isn't able to find themselves nearly as high as Sentry. Mozzie finds himself in the 44th spot, and that's because anytime I play him, I always feel like he's missing something. His gadget is decent but can't cover as much ground as Mute, his weapons are decent but lack any magnification scopes, and in the Roni's case it's been nerfed significantly, and Mozzie doesn't have any way to help his team around the site outside of his barbed wire. I think Ubisoft should consider giving Mozzie his super shorty back, allowing him to be a more well-rounded operator. That would definitely help him jump up significantly on this list. Bandit, like Thermite, is an operator that suffers from the game evolving around him too fast for him to adapt. His gadget, with EMP impacts being in the game, can easily be countered if he isn't actively tricking or on top of things. His guns are good and he has a nitro cell, but the rest of his kit has been outclassed by other sources. Maverick is a strong operator for bypassing the litany of options the defense has to deny a wall breach. That is because his blowtorch can burn through reinforcements no matter what the defense has protecting them. But the downside is that doing this is time consuming, and in a meta that is very aggressive and fast paced, it can be hard to justify bringing Maverick right now. I still think he is vastly overhated and definitely worth running on a lot of sites if you're willing to deal with the longer times it takes to get a wall open, because at least you won't have to deal with a bandit tricking or a 2 brow. Gridlock is an extremely well-rounded operator that can provide a ton of utility to her team. Her track stingers can be used to slow defender rotations and flanks, and her loadout is absolutely stacked with amazing secondary gadgets and a secondary shotgun as well. I think Gridlock is extremely underrated by most of the population, and people should definitely start testing her out in their matches. Maestro is an operator that suffers from being heavily countered. His cameras can be countered by EMPs, getting hacked by Brava's drones, explosives, Dokkaebi, and a simple melee. However, when he can manage to go uncountered, he can be quite the intel powerhouse. 3 bulletproof cameras that can zap is huge, and you get to have the Alda on top of that, probably the most fun gun in the game. But the reason why he finds himself this low is because of how easy he is to counter. Speaking of fun operators, Deimos is probably the most fun operator in the game to play on the attack. His gadget allows him to get wall hacks on anyone on the map with the click of a button, and with his patented revolver, he can take them out quite easily. Playing him from below the site is especially useful since you can kill enemies through the floor using his pings. But there are many more ways you can get utility out of him, and just by using his pings to call out the position of different defenders, it can change the game for your entire team. Solace can also use her gadget combined with her great kit to kill the attackers from below. However, her gadget is strongest for going on a roam and using it to figure out where the attackers are coming from, where they are droning, and what utility they are using, which you can then relay back to your team. Solace can easily provide your team with game-changing info, and with the loadout to match, she can be a ton of fun. The recent nerfs to her really did hurt her effectiveness though, but I still think she's a very strong roamer if you use her correctly. Sledge, just like many other operators from the base game, suffers from a lack of innovation. Other operators like Ram and Buck have just simply overshadowed him over the years, but that doesn't mean he's useless. Sledge is still useful as a choice in your vertical play arsenal, especially since he has nades. It's just in most situations I'd rather pick his competitors. Warden is an operator that's absolutely essential to Siege's sandbox since he's the most direct counter to some of the strongest operators in the game. However, if the enemy team doesn't bring any operators or smoke grenades for him to counter, then he is basically a useless pick since his gadget kind of relies on such. This is why I think Warden is the perfect candidate for the middle position on this list. Useful when he's needed, pointless when he's not. Flores is in a similar boat because his gadget, the Rotero drones, is probably the best counter to defender hard utility. Think castle barricades, maestro cams, deployable shields, etc. But if the enemy team doesn't bring any of that, you'd likely be better off picking someone else since Flores is heavily countered by Mute, a really popular defensive operator. Habana is also countered by multiple popular defensive operators. However, her ability to open a large amount of hatches for her team is really unheard of, and when combined with her loadout, it makes her a support player's dream. The only issue with her is since her pellets are slow to detonate, she can't exactly get walls open effectively, so she's only really useful on sites where reinforced hatches are a problem. Thatcher is only really useful when you need to deal with large amounts of electronic utility. However, with the onset of impact EMPs, I find myself picking Thatcher less and less. His EMPs are still very strong, but you can go without them and you'd likely be better off doing so. Goyo is an extremely underrated operator for area denial. His Vulcan canisters can single-handedly stop the opponent's push, and his weapons are insane. Having the Vector with an ACOG or the TCSG as your two primary options is solid, and it makes him extremely fun to play. The only thing that goes against him is the fact that the enemy team can use his canisters against his team if they are placed poorly, and that Twitch basically hard counters him. Outside of that, Goyo is still very strong though. Speaking of Twitch, she is the next operator in the 31st spot. I used to not be a big fan of Twitch because of her F2's recoil, but as I've gotten better, I realized I was definitely sleeping on her. Having one of the best guns in the game stat-wise in combination with 4 drones total still makes her a strong choice. Ashe is a strong choice because of her strong weapon loadout, combined with her breaching rounds, which can allow her to support her team by dealing with defender bulletproof utility, or it can be used to help Ashe pull off aggressive plays. Overall, we all know why Ashe is an extremely fun and pretty strong operator. It's why she's always at the top of the pick rate charts. Kapkan is the perfect operator for countering your typical Ashe player. His traps punish players for not properly droning and for getting too aggressive by dealing tons of damage, potentially downing the player as well. He also comes with a great loadout, and his secondary gadgets are solid as well. He's just a well-rounded operator worth picking on pretty much every site. Mira may not be good on every bomb site like Kapkan, but on the bomb site she is good on, she is game-changing. Top Floor Cafe, Armory on Border, and Oregon Basement are great examples of this. Her existence on these sites completely changes the way the attackers have to go about an attack, and it forces the opponents to bring operators specifically to counter her if they want a chance. However, the sites and situations where she is strong have lessened over the years, which is why she isn't extremely high on this list like she would have been a few years ago. Lion used to be one of the strongest operators a few years ago, but nowadays he is just a solid, well-rounded choice. His E1D scans can stop the aggression of the enemy team, his secondary gadgets give him some versatility, and his weapons are solid. There is nothing crazy about Lion, he's just a solid pick in pretty much every round. Castle, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. He, just like Mira, is strong with specific setups in mind on specific sites. He can funnel the attackers into favorable positions using his barricades, and his barricades obviously force the attackers to use utility. Then on top of that, he can use the rest of his kit to help his team set up the site. This makes Castle a support player powerhouse, but his weapons are where he is lacking. Only having the UMP to rely on just doesn't cut it for most situations. And combined with the fact that he isn't strong on every bomb site, I couldn't put him in the upper echelon. But on the bomb sites that he is strong, he basically completely alters the way the attack has to go about pushing you. Sentry finds himself in a very different situation, where he is a pretty useful pick on every bomb site, but he isn't exactly insane on any of them. Sentry, like the previously mentioned Striker, has access to all of the secondary gadgets available, but on the defense specifically in his case. This means Sentry can bring a deployable shield and barbed wire, which is some of the most important secondary utility in the game. But obviously you are sacrificing a gadget to do so. So if you can manage to get those secondary gadgets from other areas, then you'd be better off not picking Sentry. Osa is another example of an operator that is extremely strong under the right circumstances, but without the right strat or the right site, their strength begins to fade. Osa is mainly useful for holding a long line of sight for her team behind the safety of her shield. Mainly outside breaches or balconies is where she truly shines, and that's because trying to use her shields indoors leaves you extremely vulnerable. Placing them is a long animation, all of her sides are exposed while holding them out, and an explosive can shut her down immediately. But using her shield outside a breach to get a plant down can be quite strong, which is why she finds herself this high. Jaeger is probably the most infamous operator in Siege, and that's for good reason. His gadget is basically essential to every defensive lineup since it denies grenades, and back when the game first came out, he was the only person who could fill this role. However, with multiple nerfs coming his way, along with Wamai consistently getting good treatment over the years by Ubisoft, I find myself running Jaeger in game less and less. His guns and kit are absolutely awful, and most players want to avoid it, but his ADSs are amazing, which is the reason why he finds himself in the 23rd spot. Ram's gadget is extremely strong like Jaeger, but she brings the weapons to back it up as well. Ram is strong because she's a vertical play operator with drones that allow her to do her job from safety, reducing the risk of dying to a nitro cell. Also, since her drones are remotely detonated, she can play aggressively on them to pick up kills as soon as they begin opening the floor. The only thing going against Ram is that she can't open vert from below, but literally everything else about her is solid, and on top of that, she's fun, which is a plus. Aruni is a solid choice on pretty much every site. Her gates force attackers to waste utility, she has solid secondary gadget selection, she has the passive ability of being able to punch rotates in the walls, and she has a DMR on the defense. You pretty much couldn't ask for a more well-rounded kit. The same thing applies to Frost, who has access to the deployable shield, 3 Frost mats, a secondary shotgun, and a decent SMG in the form of the C1. And the best part is, all of this utility is useful on virtually any site. The only downside to Frost is that her traps were recently nerfed, but she is still strong despite this nerf. The Jackal has also gone through a litany of nerfs throughout his life, but he still stands strong as a surprisingly useful roam clear. His tracking capability is really unmatched, and the weapons he brings alongside him guarantees he has the upper hand in any fight against a roamer. There's a reason Jackal is banned so much at lower ranks. He's annoying, strong, and hard to counter. Melusi is 2 of those 3 things. Her gadget is strong, and she can be annoying to go against. And after the mid-season patch, both of these have been exacerbated. Melusi now has a secondary shotgun, 4 Banshees, and impacts. It's a ton of utility for a trap operator. And while her weapon loadout may not be the best, the rest of her kit definitely makes up for it. Grim is an operator that has made a huge comeback over the past few seasons because of Ubisoft giving him some big buffs. His bees are way more useful now, they last longer, they cover a larger radius, and his launcher is way less clunky, which makes it easier to get utility out of his gadget without dying. These buffs put him in the perfect position to help his team on site executions and to aid aid in forcing enemies out of a power position. These aspects, combined with his loadout being amazing and him having a great secondary gadget selection, makes him a pretty solid choice in any given round. Iana is another example of an operator that's well-rounded that can be useful for the team and her user in pretty much every round. She gets access to infinite drones with great guns and solid secondary gadgets as well. These aspects combined make Iana one of the best operators for solo queue as well, since you don't have to rely on teammates for intel when you have infinite drones at your disposal. Montaigne may not have infinite drones, but in his fully extended state, he basically functions as a walking drone for his team. This ability makes him quite strong at forcing defenders out of positions and taking map control. And with the shield rework, he can do all of this while being safer than ever and harder to counter. You can pick up Montaigne in almost any round and you'll get some form of utility out of him, especially since most ranked players aren't very good at countering him. Valk is also the prime example of an operator that will give you unwavering value in any round. Giving 3 additional cameras to the team is a huge asset, but getting a nitrocell on top of that to more effectively act off your cams is even better. The only downside you could really levy towards Valk is that her MPX's damage isn't the best, but its low recoil allows her to hit easy headshots, so that doesn't really matter. Wamai, on the other hand, is such a strong operator that his existence has phased out Jaeger in the meta, one of the strongest operators in the game for many years. That's because Wamai can more reliably capture more projectiles, his gadgets can capture a larger variety of projectiles than Jaeger, like Capital crossbow bolts, and he has way better guns than Jaeger. Wamai has the MP5K, one of the strongest SMGs in the game, and the AUG A3, a weapon that consistently finds itself at the top of the charts for DPS on the defensive side. You really can't go wrong with Wamai, and his gadget by very nature is useful on every site. The same thing can be said about Sophia, who has one of the most versatile gadgets in the game. Her launcher has impact grenades that can help her deal with utility and open soft surfaces quickly, and then her launcher also has stuns that can be used to burn ADSs or to quickly check rooms for you. This combined with her great weapons and her 3 armor rating makes her a fragging powerhouse. This is why you see Sophia picked a lot at higher ranks and in professional play. Fenrir is also an operator that has been dominating the pick rate charts for a while, and that's for multiple reasons. Firstly, he has probably the strongest traps in the game since they blind the opponent significantly and they can be hard to spot and shoot. Secondly, Fenrir has a great loadout with the MP7 as his main primary option and the Bailiff as his main secondary, which means he's pretty much strong in every aspect, and that's despite all the nerfs Ubisoft has thrown his way. Smoke used to be arguably the best defender in the game, but after losing his shield, I think the 10th position is the perfect spot for him. That's because Smoke is still very strong. His gadget, the smoke canisters, are amazing for slowing down the attack and potentially stopping a plant in a pinch. This combined with the shotgun SMG-11 combo makes him an absolute powerhouse. And while the loss of the deployable shield was a big hit since it works so well with his gadget, he still has access to barbed wire, so it's not a tremendous loss. Everything else about him though is literally perfect, and if he still had his shield, he'd definitely be way higher on this list. Legion is the first example in this video of a perfect operator in my eyes. His traps are amazing for giving his team intel and slowing the attackers down. He gets a ton of them so he can cover basically the whole map, and he has an amazing loadout. You really can't go wrong with picking Legion under any circumstances. He provides a ton of utility to the team, and he can be a great solo queue operator due to the info he provides. Mute does the exact opposite. He deprives intel from the enemy team and does it amazingly well. His jammers top all electronics in their radius, including drones, which is the main way you should be using him. These strong jammers combined with Mute's shotgun and SMG-11 combo make him an absolute powerhouse for helping his team set up the site. He even has a nitro cell to top it all off, putting him in the conversation as the most versatile defender in the game. Speaking of versatility, when the average player thinks of that word, I guarantee you Buck is one of the first to come to mind. His underbarrel shotgun is perfect for opening any soft surface, his primary C8 assault rifle is amazing, and his secondary gadget selection is perfect for his role. This is what makes Buck such a popular operator when discussing solo queue, because he can basically act as a one-man army. If you ever need a vertical play operator in your team, Buck is definitely your guy, but even if you don't, he can still be a strong choice. If you want to slow down the attackers from getting a wall open though, then Tuberau is your guy. His canisters guarantee 30 seconds total off the round if used properly, since they freeze any gadgets in their radius. This makes Tuberau an alluring choice since he can't be easily countered, especially compared to Bandit. That's why in higher ranks and in Pro League especially, he has such a huge impact because his presence can mean the difference between winning or losing the round. Azami can also mean the difference between winning or losing because of her sheer amount of utility. Her Kibas waste a lot of time off the attack since they typically require the enemy to use explosive utility to get rid of them, and they slow the enemy team down since they have to be wary of a defender playing off of your Kibas. If the attackers aren't prepared for an Azami and they don't bring enough explosives, it can be devastating for their chances in a round. And even if they do, it's still going to waste a lot of time off the clock. Ying can also significantly increase your team's chances of winning a round by bringing her patented Candelas to the roster. These Candelas are mainly useful for taking map control and for forcing defenders into disadvantageous gunfights, but they could also be used for aggressive plays and for aiding late round for supporting the plant. This combined with the smoke grenades in her loadout makes her an amazing choice for any situation when it comes to aggression or taking painstaking map control. Cade is amazing in every round or scenario, but for very different reasons. Cade's electric claws are arguably the most useful form of breach style in the game, since they're the only gadget that can deny a hatch, and since they can cover up to 3 walls, which is insane compared to the competition. Dokkaebi compared to her competition is really unmatched though. She can call the enemy team, revealing every defender's position and forcing all defenders off their cams, even dead ones. She can hack into the enemy camera system. She has a wide range of secondary gadgets that can fill basically any possible use case. Her loadout is solid, with her having one of the best DMRs in the game, with machine pistol options as her secondaries, and she is a 3-speed. I couldn't say anything bad about Dokkaebi even if I tried. The same thing can be said about Ace, who finds himself at the #1 spot in this video, crowning him as the best operator in Siege right now. And I stand by that statement. Ace has changed the way attackers go about taking a site, and without him, the attackers would have a much harder time. His Selmas are the only breaches in the game that can reliably open walls from a distance at speed. His weapons are amazing, which is rare for a hard breacher, and if he's quick enough, he can stop a bandit from tricking as well. Just an amazing game-defining operator that is a necessity in almost every attacking round. Anyways, hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. As always, this video is strictly my opinion, and if you disagree, feel free to leave your opinions in the comments down below. If you did enjoy today's video, I make Siege content just like this twice a week, so go subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter if you don't want to miss the next upload. If you want to watch another video just like this one, I'll be popping up on your screen right now that I'm sure you all enjoy. I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.